Okay, so before you downvote this video and tell me all sorts of unsavory things in the comments section, I do want to start this off by saying there is a ton to love about Persona 3, and to a certain extent, I can absolutely understand the people who say it is their favorite in the franchise. But I wanted to make a video sharing my opinions on it, as well as, with the recent news of the remake coming out in early 2024, what my hopes are for the first Persona remake ever. Persona 3 is a game very close to a lot of people's hearts, whether they've played the PlayStation 2 Fest version or the used-to-be PSP exclusive, now mixed on Steam re-release of Portable. It is considered the first game in what is now known as the modern Persona trilogy and was the progenitor of many of the tropes and mechanics later games would use and, more often than not, refine. Please note, my goal with this video isn't to try and convince anyone they're wrong for their opinions on the game. If you love the game, flaws and all, or even if you disagree with me and think the flaws I bring up aren't flaws at all, I still ask you at least listen to what I have to say before setting me on fire. Hey, just going to take a quick moment of your time real quick just to say we're on that road to hitting partner, so if you could do me a big favor and just subscribe, I would really appreciate it. You would be doing me and the channel a huge favor, and I really appreciate it. So first of all, I want to open this up with the things I like about Persona 3, because there is a lot to love about this game. As the game that started the whole social link mechanic that the series would later be known for, while some of them are admittedly not great, the ones that are good are really good. Akinari, the Sun social link, is just incredible. To this day, it is still one of my favorite social links in the series. It hits the themes of the game so well, and it's just so emotional. And that moment in the epilogue where you talk to his mom and offer her the story he wrote just for her to decline and say she'll wait to hear it from him herself when they meet again. It's beautiful. And while it's getting ahead of myself a bit, here's hoping the remake doesn't touch this social link at all. The music is just...
3 enemies present. Don't get carried.
Chef's kiss. Arguably the best the franchise has to offer. Although it's not my favorite, that still belongs to Persona 5, mostly due to my violin bias, admittedly, but Persona 3 comes pretty damn close, and if the trailer we've seen is anything to go by, it looks like we've got some absolute bangers to look forward to. Now, I'm not going to give you guys an entire rundown of the story and go over all the ups and downs to it. There's plenty of videos on this site that do that already. I will say though, the story is overall pretty good. Yeah, it's a slow burn and not a ton happens in it until near the end, but I still enjoy it. It accurately portrays the themes it's trying to get across, namely, everything must eventually come to an end, but not to let that discourage you and instead use that as motivation to live life to its fullest. The characters in the story are pretty likable, and in my opinion, I actually prefer how the main cast develops throughout the story rather than putting it behind optional content. Now that characters can develop as a result of the main plot, as opposed to later entries, that means this game and the inevitable spin-offs that will happen can be made with these developments in mind. Even though the current spin-offs haven't exactly done a good job at that thus far.
First thing, protein. Second thing, protein.
Or even on a more minor note, the fact that Persona 3 Portable was the first game in the franchise to introduce the concept of having a different protagonist to play through the adventure with her own social links and even her own Velvet Room attendant was a nice touch that does genuinely add some replay value, something we haven't had in the series since. Of course, there's more good to the game, like, for example, it was the first first game in the franchise to introduce the one more battle system we all know and love today, or I could even talk about the whole wildcard thing, which, in my opinion, is better than having every character be able to use just about every persona, but those are rather small bits, and I think it's about time we moved on to the not so good, and what I hope they address in the remake. My biggest hope of the remake is that it's not just Persona 3 but with better graphics and small tweaks to the gameplay, because if that's the case, you could get away with just a remaster. The purpose of a remake is to actually give a new experience compared to the original game. Not to say everything needs to be different, but I personally don't see the point of buying a game if it's the exact same game with minor changes at best. Looking at you, Dark Souls. The first thing that comes to mind are the social links. I know I just praised them earlier, and yes, some of these social links are genuinely worth praising. A good chunk of them, however, are not. Need I remind you of the Gourmet King? Putting him aside, the rest of the social links in the game range anywhere from okay to just not good. Not to say every social link in 4 or 5 was good or without their flaws, but 3 has the weakest of the bunch. Now, I don't hold that against Persona 3, I get it. It was the first game in the series to try its hand at it, and I can forgive it for being off the mark. But the remake will not be given the same grace. It has been nearly 2 decades since the original release. Please do better in the writing here. Again, except for Akinari. Atlus nailed that. Also, yes, obviously, I would want the male party members to have their own social links as well. It's weird they didn't have them in the original game, but I'm sure it's something that will be in the remake, so I won't dwell on that for too long. Another topic I won't dwell on for too long is the combat system. For anyone with experience in the original release of Persona 3, you know exactly where I'm going with this. The tactics system. Now, I'm not going to go on a giant tirade about it, but for those unfamiliar, let's take a moment to explain how the tactics system worked. It was nothing too complicated, but to put it shortly, in Persona 3, you had no direct control over your party members. They were all controlled by AI. Now, you could manipulate that AI to a degree with the tactics system, with things like knockdown, heal and support, full assault, act freely, etc. The main problem here is you might set someone like Yukari to heal and support with the hopes that she'll use the heal all spell, but she could just use the single target heal, or she might heal the wrong person, or you might get crit and have to spend your entire turn standing up, be in desperate need of healing, but then be unable to swap your party members out of their current tactics, leading to your easily preventable death. Now, despite all that, I'd say the tactics system works about 90 to 95% of the time, and when it does work, when it all just clicks, it does admittedly feel good, but it's that 5 to 10% of the time it doesn't that leads to some of the most frustrating moments in the game. It's one thing when I lose a battle because I'm dumb and made dumb decisions. It's another when I lose because I got screwed over by RNG with nothing I could do about it. That being said, I don't expect them to be required in the remake. It was an interesting experiment back in 2006, but considering the fact the tactics system has been optional in every game since, even in the later re-release of Portable, I sincerely doubt it'll be required in the remake. They'll most likely be there as an option, and that I'm perfectly fine with. Now, for the real meat and potatoes of the video, my biggest issue with Persona 3 and my biggest hope for the remake. Let's talk about Tartarus. What's Tartarus, you might ask? Well, Persona 5 fans out there, remember Mementos? How it was nothing but randomized chunks of levels slapdashed together for a little less than 100 floors? Yeah? Now triple that, and make it the only dungeon in the game with some blocks that go to 50 floors. That's Tartarus. It's not a fun experience, despite what Persona 3 apologists might tell you. There are 2 dungeon designs I cannot stand in a game. One is randomly designed nothing burgers of a dungeon, and the other are the fucking warp panels in Pokemon. Who made this? Tangent aside, sorry, let's talk about Tartarus. Early in the game, the player is introduced to Tartarus, which is supposedly the breeding ground for all shadows, the main enemies of the game, by the rest of Seas, the specialized extracurricular execution squad. The main goal of the group is to get to the top of Tartarus and hopefully find out the secrets of the shadows, the dark hour, and, with any luck, find a way to bring a stop to both. Now, much like Mementos, certain blocks of Tartarus unlock after certain story events, so you can't get to the very top of this massive dungeon on your first go, which is fine, I don't mind that. What I do mind is the fact that Tartarus is nothing but randomized chunks mashed together. On paper, something like this sounds like it'd make things more exciting. After all, you never know what you'll find on the next floor. The problem here is, there is nothing to distinguish different floors. Every floor plays out the same. You have a few rooms, some shadows, and a staircase leading to the next floor. Rinse and repeat. Sometimes you might find a treasure chest with randomized loot, but that's really it. There are no puzzles, nothing to discover, no real exploration. Just fight shadows and go to the next floor. I honestly could not tell you the difference between floor 20 and floor 200. Now, before someone in the comments section brings it up, yes, I am aware this is by design. Tartarus was meant to represent the themes of the game, that sometimes life just seems like an eternal climb with no end in sight. Cool, artsy design, awesome. But hot take, this is a video game, and I don't care how artistically appropriate something is, if it's not fun to play through, I'm not going to enjoy it. Maybe my dumb Neanderthal brain just can't appreciate true art, but in my honest opinion, something being intentionally bad is still bad. This is my main concern for the remake by far. From the little bit of footage we have so far, it seems Tartarus is going to be just as long as it was in Fes, or at the very least, it's going to be longer than Mementos. Of course, we know nothing about it so far, nothing official has come out, and I'm open to being pleasantly surprised. But let's take a moment and talk about ways I would fix this glaring issue anyway. My first thought would be cut Tartarus to a third of its length. 273 floors of randomized nothing with only the occasional boss to break up the monotony is far from engaging, especially when some of those blocks are 50 floors deep. Keep in mind, Persona is a game where you want to make the most out of the limited time you have, so of course you're encouraged to get as deep as you can in a single go, even if the game itself suggests you take a break. Logically, you don't want to until you've reached the peak of what you can. Having smaller chunks and just less floors to go through would help immensely. But what about content, you might ask? How will we give people something to do if Tartarus isn't this massive mega dungeon? Easy! So in Persona 3, there are these shadows called full moon shadows. Not giving a full rundown, these end up being the main bosses of the game, and taking out all 12 of them ends up being the main goal of the plot for most of the run. So why not just give them their own dungeons? Put the content there. Let me solve puzzles and explore handcrafted dungeons for these bosses. The game even does this to a small degree already with some of the shadows. The best example being the Lover's Arcana shadow. This shadow is found in a love hotel, and in order to get to it, you have to find it by guessing the right mirror twice. Yes, this is the most interesting dungeon in the game. A copy-paste of Lieutenant Surge's gym from Pokemon Red. Every other dungeon is a simple hallway until you get to the boss. Why not just expand on those? I know it's a meme to say, this should be like Persona 5, but unironically, P5 has the best designed dungeons in the series. Taking elements from 5's design and using them to enhance later games just comes off as a no-brainer to me, especially considering the massive success of that game. game. But assuming they won't do that, and since we already have soft confirmation that Tartarus is as long as ever, what else can we do to improve Tartarus? Well, the second best option, and the most likely thing to happen if they plan to change it at all, is have blocks that aren't randomized. Maybe 10 floors every once in a while that are handcrafted. Give us something to break the monotony. While I don't like this option nearly as much as option A, it is admittedly something that would make Tartarus to some degree fun instead of the boring, mindless grind it currently is. From the footage we have, I have a small hope this is what they're going for, at least based off the scale of the rooms we've seen so far. If Tartarus ends up being nearly 300 floors again, but this time with massive rooms, it will unironically be worse than it was in the original release, where at the very least, the floors ended up being somewhat compact, at least compared to the TV world in Persona 4. Now, there are other things I would like changed or fixed or to have in the game. Like, for example, if the answer is in the game, which doesn't seem to be the case based off recent reports, I'd like some rewrites in that department. Or, hopefully we could get the inclusion of the FemC, even as DLC, which is scummy, but that's a different topic. Or how I want Strega to actually be fully fleshed out, or even how I would like the main protagonist to not be silent, even if he's not as egregious as Joker. But all of that is small potatoes to me when the main thing holding Persona 3 back is its main gameplay loop. Tartarus is by far the thing that needs the most work, and it's going to be, without a doubt, the thing that makes or breaks this remake for me. Now, I want to end this video off by saying I want to like Persona 3. I really do. None of what I say comes from a place of hatred. There are elements about the game that I think are genuinely brilliant, but there's just too much holding Persona 3 back. I've attempted a second playthrough of the game several times now, but every time I get to around floor 80 of Tartarus before I just get so bored, I shut the game off and play something else. This remake has so much potential, and I am praying that Atlus fully realizes it instead of just giving us Persona 3 with better graphics and party member control. Hey, so thanks for getting to the end of the video. I do appreciate it. If you enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, all of that. We're actually about halfway now because YouTube changed the partnership requirements. So now we're about halfway there on the subscriber count, excuse me. And I would really appreciate it if you just went ahead and you press that subscribe button. Help me out if you like the video. That's my dog. You probably heard. We're not going to edit this part too much, I don't think. And I also wanted to address, because the interview literally came out as I was wrapping this video up, so we're going to go ahead and address it. So recently, there's this interview that just came out, just got translated, and they talked about Tartarus, which was the thing I talked about the most in the video. And what they said was, essentially, Tartarus is basically unchanged from the original Persona 3. All they really did was add some breakable furniture to it. So, cool, I guess. That'll fix the issues. Now, I don't know, maybe the interview didn't do a good job. Maybe they changed more to it. Maybe they made it more exciting. We'll see, because it's not like randomized dungeons can't work, obviously. I know there are games like Slay the Spire. Well, that's not a dungeon. Or games like, Binding of Isaac, which is all randomized, and people love that game. But I feel like that's a bit different from Persona 3, but we're rambling. We'll see how it comes. I'll look at it when it comes out, and if I decide it's worth it, I might stream it. We'll see. I do stream at twitch.tv/BillyTheCorgi. Come stop by if you'd like. I would appreciate it. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for watching.